hand reached for a brown case, carefully lifting the lid. In a measured motion, he pulled out a pre-cut cigar. The man flicked open a Zippo lighter, yellow flame dancing as the tip reddened. Exhaling a breath of smoke, the lighter returned back to his breast pocket with a clack. "It's been a real long war, hasn't it?" the man thought. Red emergency lighting dimmed slightly, an unseen fission reactor shuddered. Automated systems limped along, running with the electronic equivalent of severe head trauma. The ship's dumb VI attempts to brute force the startup, being hit with cascading errors and manufacturing lockout. Giving a kick to the reactor's attendant, it transmitted override codes from the bridge. Ignoring the protests of an even duller VI complaining about a compromised housing, it manually gave another shock to the system. A faint blue light emanated from a spaced fission power plant, before outputting a gross overload to the remaining severely overstressed power lines. The skeletal hull of the amber-clad groaned as a capacitor array mounted in the now vented B1 engineering section failed to handle the newly handed load. White flames burst from voided maintenance tunnels, searing the battle steel halls in a flash, vaporizing the bodies of the fallen. An airlock glowed a dull red as excess pressure and heat slammed against the door in a violent frenzy, desperate to get away. Subliminal thrusters in the near bisected ship glowed with a deep azure as the power spike gave it life for a brief second, then vanished. Sensing the absolute state of the ship, the VI queried its databanks for a moment. Brain rack corruption detected. 22% system return. Critical data loss detected. Unable to return. Request contact nearest Biord Shipworks representative for inspection and repair. Giving an electronic huff in response, it shunted itself to a physical AI core for pickup, adding its own distress calls to the ship's cries for help. A miasma of smoke formed a foot from the man's face in the bridge. O2 scrubbers and ventilation are out shit. "Captain, I can't get a response from damage control. The reactor isn't returning anything. The whole region's dead." The little bug ranted, waving its antennae around. The Terran just gave a heavy sigh. "Main reactor's about a light minute out relative east of here, along with the crack round that so lovingly pulled it from our embrace," intoned the man, taking a glance at the XO. What's left of the poor bastard was covered in an emergency thermal blanket. Got caught up in a torrent of shrapnel when they took a bad salvo. "What?" Click-tacked paused for a moment before saddling up to the man. "Well, what can we do? Maybe we can alert someone nearby? Get some Confederate ships over here. There has to be some, right? Somebody has to be close." The being sounded like it was about to hyperventilate. "I heard about the legends. The Terrans were praised and feared for their ingenuity and cleverness, getting out of impossible situations just like this one." Click-tacked started preening his antennae, a nervous tick. "IFF and any of the quantum relays still attached and powered are squawking our position. If we're lucky, a SAR team will come and pick us up," he deadpanned. The Terran finally turned to appraise his subordinate. The being only came halfway up his thigh, a small yellow band around the abdomen signifying it was an engineer. The closest thing he could compare it to was a 3-foot-tall praying mantis with expressive eyes, its vermilion carapace reminding him of autumn. He noted that it twitched awkwardly on the deck. It seemed to shrink down further as the engineer spoke in a small voice. "And if we aren't?" Shifting on the balls of his feet, the captain looked indecisive before striding towards his command center, carefully stepping past a fallen ceiling tile. The mantid scurried along to follow along after him. Bending down, the man held the bottom of his palm against something on the desk. The seamless white surface of the desk popped open with a hiss. Click-tacked was amazed at first, being in a place of authority. He'd only ever prowled the maintenance tunnels of the amber-clad, looking for burnt-out fuses or cables that needed replacing. Standard practice for a Yiklicician like himself. Their small stature meant they could squeeze into places the Terrans couldn't, something he prided himself on. Seeing a dead one dulled that excitement. It made him nervous, seeing something by all rights most species considered unkillable in the same grave as his brothers. They were mortal, just like he was. They were tough, sure, much more than he was. But the Terrans acted like they weren't, acted like taking a waltz into space wouldn't kill him faster than they could drain a bottle of narcotics. He saw rows of flickering and dead monitors, chairs that once held beings he never knew, some still did. It was empty, Silent. Not even the background noise of humming electronics and moving air was present anymore. Just silence, drifting around an uncaring orange star amidst a graveyard of steel and blood, except for a sound of rushing liquid. "You scared Private?" The middle-aged man spoke softly, pouring an amber liquid into 2 small glasses, not even looking at the engineer. His cigar continued to burn a bright red in an ashtray. "Yes, sir," the engineer answered, sounding unsure, fully expecting to be dressed down. The Terran silently acknowledged his answer as he slid one of the glasses over. "Drink that, it'll calm your nerves." "What is it?" the little mantid said as he inspected the liquid swirling the glass. Twisting the cap back on the square bottle, the captain set it beside the 2.5D projector. "Genuine Earth bourbon, straight from Kentucky, none of that nano-forgery bullshit." The engineer noted he sounded almost disgusted at the last part. Letting himself down, the man sat back in his leather captain's chair, looking at the engineer's head peeking over the desk. The Terran made an odd face before nodding to his right. "Sit," he ordered. "The XO isn't here anymore. Rank doesn't mean much right now." The mantid just nodded and carried its drink towards the officer's chair, making an attempt to get comfortable. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what's going to happen. To me, and to you." He paused to take a sip of his bourbon. "We're most likely gonna die here." The engineer just nodded gravely, quickly taking a tentative sip of his own. It was warm going down, almost burning. "I'd say we're running on a backup of a backup right now. I think I heard something explode a few minutes ago," he said, gesturing to the sealed bridge doors. "Either an ammo cook-off or maybe some reserve reactor gave us the slip." Rotating his chair, the Terran made sure to look click-tacked in the eyes, his weathered features being highlighted in the crimson glow of emergency lights. "Either the oxygen is going to run out, or the inside of the bridge is going to hit below freezing. I'd wager on the oxygen first, though." "Why?" The little mantid barely got out. The Terran set the glass down while leaning back, looking up at the ceiling, and made a deep exhale. Click-tacked couldn't get a read on him. The Terran just held a blank face. A hand reached for a belt, carefully lifting a sidearm. In a measured motion, the man racked the slide and set it on a desk. Click-tacked sank back in his seat. Amber liquid nearly spilt. The tired man gave another sigh. "I want you to have options. It will be quick and painless." He trailed off for a moment. "Suffocating ain't a pretty thing, and I don't want you going out like that. It's there if you want it, just say the word." Click-tacked quickly drained the glass to the halfway mark. "I don't want to die," came a whisper. "I know," a voice whispered back. David leaned his elbow on his desk, holding his head with a hand. "We're all out of options, kid," he sounded resigned. "There's nothing left I can do. I tried, we just have to wait." "Oh," Click-tacked responded. The two just sat there for a minute, gently sipping their drinks. They watched the dead hulk of a gank vessel slowly drift in front of the sun. Light filtered through the massive holes from rail cannons. It made a slow, rippling effect in the deck's lighting. Their faces went in and out of darkness, just admiring the beauty of the universe. Hazy smoke lifting from a cigar made the sun waver just a bit. The tip of the Terran smokestick was a deep crimson. "Are you scared, Captain?" The mantid finally interrupted the silence. David continued to look at the drifting hulk, his face softening for just a moment. "Yeah." A triangular face reflected in the waves of the amber liquid. "You don't seem like it." David picked up his glass again. "Let me tell you something you wouldn't hear from any human, not normally anyway." He lifted his gaze at the mantid. "We are scared. We're always scared. The universe is a scary place after all. When a human faces down a fleet twice the size of their own, a being thrice their size with only a knife between their teeth and the grit to face it down, they are scared. You just don't see it. Under every human's face is a mask. We don't like it when others see our emotions. We don't like appearing weak." In one smooth motion, David emptied the glass and set it down near the bourbon. "There are other emotions too, ones that mask our fear. We feel the thrill of combat. When someone in a fighter is chasing their prey and a wave of flak is hammering the hull, underneath the adrenaline rush is a small part of our brains that scream in fear." The little engineer just listened intently. "When our partner is giving birth, we worry for them, for the child. But we can't look weak in front of them. We put on a face of strength. So they too feel strong, so they can be comforted. David pointed at the manted. Just like you and your fellow crewmates, I have to put on a mask to look strong. People feel confident when they are led by confidence. Humans feel every bit of emotion you do. We just have an urge to hide it, bury it. Click-tack just stared before reflecting in his drink. I think I understand, Captain. The Terran grabbed the bourbon and poured another round for himself. He could sense the atmosphere becoming thick enough to notice it. My name's David. You can drop the honorifics. We'll be here for a little bit. David mused as he took another sip. David, I wanted to ask you something. The engineer fiddled around in the chair as he spoke. He looked at the engineer through a raised glass. Shoot. We may not have the same concept of a family unit as you Terrans do, but we still have a deep connection with our queen. Our mother, so to speak. I would like to speak to her again. Click-tack said, stressing the word concept, trailing off as he spoke. David furrowed his brow for a second. Hypercom quantum relays are still running. They should be, at least. You know your way around a communications console. I don't. I'm just a mechanical engineer, sir. Click-tack caught himself, but not in time. David? The Terran just waved it off. Brushing the slacks of his captain's uniform of dust, he stood up. Come on, we'll get you a message out. If we're lucky, maybe a live comm. Won't hurt nothing trying. Two beings moved throughout an empty bridge, footsteps echoing too in an eerie silence, all in a broken ship in an empty system full of dead wrecks. Thousands of sapient life came here to die, hundreds of thousands of light years away from home. An admiral looks at a monitor, seeing that the fleet went dark, takes note and takes a sip of his coffee. There, I got you set up. Just click this button and it'll start. David leaned over the engineer in the chair, pointing to the enter key. The connection was sitting at 736 ms, but it was stable. It'll be a little delayed, but that's what we're working with. The Terran left, patting the manted on the shoulder. Thank you, David. This means more than you can imagine. The engineer behind him sounded odd, almost on the verge of tears. It made the man pause mid-step. A captain shouldn't be anything less for his men, and I would never do no less. You're a good man, Click. Say hi to your family for me. And he resumed his stride. He picked up the sound of exchanging greetings as he slumped down in his old chair. His eyes flickered between the glass and the bottle and decided on the bottle. Fuck it. No tight-ass desk jockey is gonna harass me for being out of decorum, he thought. David sat there nursing the bottle as the minutes passed by. He heard fragments of conversation as he stared out into the great expanse of space. He thought about calling his daughter for a moment after Click. He shook his head. My baby's already grown up. She don't need me anymore. Smoothly opening a drawer, David picked out a rectangle object, a frame of his daughter's graduation from UNNAC Naval Academy. She was already an officer. Oh, how they grow up so fast. I never believed my father always said they did. Felt like growing up took ages. It felt like a blink of an eye for her. With care, he set the frame on the desk, his daughter facing the sun. God damn, the air's getting heavy in here, he thought while pulling at his collar. His eyes fell to the weapon on the table. He closed them. No, not now. It'd scare the ever-loving shit out of the kid. He let his thoughts drift for a moment. The cigar held a small crimson spark, smoke wavering uncertainly. Captain David. David, I'm scared. It's getting hard to breathe. Please wake up. David's head throbbed with a searing headache even through the buzz of the alcohol. God damn it! He held his head in his hand without opening his eyes. I need to focus. I got you, kid. It'll be all right. The little manted was tugging at his pant leg. The Terran stumbled his way over to the emergency void suits, half tripping over a cable that was blown loose from the fighting. 11 out of 12 slots were empty. His bridge crew took them when they went to seal hull breaches. Shit. He stabilized himself on an empty locker. All right, listen, there's only one suit left, one mask, one tank. David grabbed the form-fitting mask and tossed it down to Click-tack. The oxygen tank clattered after it. Humans are tough. You heard the stories. I can live without it for a bit. He stopped for a second, breathing heavily. You can't. Click-tack wasn't sure if he believed the Terran. Part of him wanted to. We can share it. The oxygen, right? Take turns with the mask until someone rescues us." The Mantid tried. He slumped back slightly against the locker, trying to take some pressure off of his legs. "You're really not making this easy. At the very least, the nearest fleet is a day out maybe half of one. Those scum-sucking gank pricks might even have an interdiction fleet between us and Confed lines," he thought angrily. David could feel his heart pounding, making a futile attempt to circulate faster, as if it could somehow make oxygen appear through sheer effort. "That tank is only rated for 18 hours. The ship's O2 scrubbers and recovery systems were supposed to refill them. If they weren't fucking scrap, we wouldn't have enough time." "No," the human got out after a large inhale. But the human interrupted him by placing the breath mask over the Mantid's head. The engineer's eyes immediately refocused, centering on his own. "That wasn't an ask. It was an order, Private. You are by no means to take off that apparatus." David made a point to grab the engineer's shoulders. Click-tacked merely nodded, diverting his eyes. David stood up on trembling legs and released his grip. "Good." He started back towards his desk, making an extreme effort to appear dignified, and only slightly failing. Falling back down in his chair, he felt a wave of drowsiness try to pull his consciousness down. Resisting the temptation for the moment, David looked over at the Mantid, who scarcely moved. "Monitor the comms. Alert me if anything responds or pops in system." He tried to make it hard, make it sound stern, but his ragged breathing betrayed him. Click-tack didn't respond, just fidgeting with his blade arms. The engineer stared at the floor for several unending seconds. "You're scared, aren't you, David?" Click-tack said softly, still not looking at him. The two sat in silence, just listening to one another's breathing. "Yes," came the second time that day. David took a steadying breath and continued. "You know there isn't enough for the both of us. Standard response times are tens of hours away. That supply is rated 18 hours. Another wave of drowsiness tried to pull on his consciousness. It was harder to pull away. "Chances are we'd never make it if we did." Click-tacked finally looked his captain in the eyes. "Why me?" The question was simple. Closing his eyes came easy to him, easier than he liked. "Because you still have family, a place to go back to. My baby's moved on without me. My beloved passed away a few years back." Click-tacked could sense the heartbreak underneath the gravelly voice. "Thank you," the engineer said under their breath. David's voice drifted off. The bridge once again descended into silence. Click-tacked listened to David's shallow breathing. Hours passed by, unbearable hours. He had nothing else to distract himself. Click-tacked wanted to weep, but he couldn't. A single vessel drifted into the system, slowly burning for the amber-clad.